let me say a special good morning to our listeners, those of you via Classic Radio 105.5 and 105.9. Good Wednesday morning to you, our viewers via GBN TV, whether you're viewing Channel 7, Channel 11 or Channels 20. Special good morning to you also. What about our, of course, social media audience? Those of you via our Facebook page, YouTube channels, via GBN's webpage, gbn.gd. Good morning and welcome to another edition of To The Point. I'm your host, GT, with you this morning. And with me this morning, I have Mr. Richard Duncan with me once again. Is it a couple of months ago we were here?
Yeah, about 2 months ago.
About 2 months ago. Yeah. It felt a little longer than that. See, that's how we spoke to me. This morning, of course, let me say welcome once again. Our program this morning is definitely based more or less on, we'll be talking budget this morning. Last week we had the Minister of Finance, was it last Monday? The Minister of Finance, of course, gave us a $1.6 billion budget. And we of course, going to discuss that this morning. Our main focus of conversation this morning is the impact the ordinary grassroots man and woman, how the budget will have impact on them. Yes. That's going to be our main focus of our conversation. And it's going to be a two-part, of course, interview this morning. We are also expecting Minister Andy Williams to pop in with us this morning, so we can have a limited edition, of course, with Mr. Richard Duncan. Mr. Duncan, any intro you want to give this one before we kick it off? In terms of the topic line that I focused on this morning, how the budget going to impact the ordinary grassroots man and woman in the 2024 budget. As an intro this morning, before we get into the questionnaire, and we're also going to invite our listeners and viewers, maybe have a question or two they would like to ask you.
Yeah, thank you very much, GT, and good morning to the listening and viewing public. By way of intro, I want to start off by commending the Minister of Finance for a well-presented budget statement for 2024, and to highlight the fact that the budget, as he articulated, is a budget for the people, by the people. And, he really and truly had something inside there for all strata and segment of the Grenadian public, but more predominantly, I think that there was a clear emphasis on how it is, through a transformational strategy, we're going to uplift the small man, the grassroots people, as we like to say, however we define that. But I think also very importantly is that those persons who are justifiably in need of state support to help with the development and the advancement and so on, I think there was some goodies inside there for them. We can speak to that in some more details and to see how it is, in my opinion, more can be done, not from a money standpoint, but from an organizational standpoint, to help lift people out of poverty, or to lift them to a higher level of skill set, income earning capacity, whether by employment or by business. So I think those things were nicely embedded in the 2024 budget.
All right, let's kick it off. My first question that comes to mind, because you sort of mentioned it in between in your intro this morning. Now, with the high food prices, as we see, the cut in the food security budget for 2024, and agriculture is on a low. Why should I say? Let me get at that. Why was there a cut in this particular program, one? And what type of food security activities does the government intend to roll out this in the upcoming year?
Well, in terms of food security and whatever I say, nutritional security, to be more precise, because we had to talk about not just food in itself, but rather wholesome, quality, nutritionally valuable and appropriate foods for our population. We know that Grenada has suffered over the years in terms of the decline in the agricultural sector, and therefore the approach that needs to be taken is one that is particularly focused and, to my mind, very clinical. We have been spending on food production or food cultivation. We have done little by way of processing, by way of preservation, and therefore you would find times when there are shortages of certain vegetables as well as ground provisions, for example, on the island. We still import a fair amount from out of St. Vincent. So the actual resolution, to me, of our food security problem, however we define it, has to be one where farmers can be brought in to the production business, who are, serious about it, who can sustain the farm, on a viable commercial basis. So yes, things like the plowing service that has been a problem for farmers. They have complained, right? You have farmers who want additional lands and can't get, and you have farmers who, even when they get additional lands, have problems of predial larceny, which has been a perennial problem that also needs to be solved. So it's a risky area, complex, and I think the Ministry of Agriculture, as they rebuild their capacity, because the other thing too is that ministry has been decimated in terms of the talent that they have at their disposal, including the people who have retired over the years, not been replaced, and therefore they are unable to properly structure their support for farmers. So when you see a reduction in the budget, for example, where that may have occurred, it is not so much so that less money will be spent, because in some instances you have a lot of money being allocated, but the capacity of the ministry to execute the program and to spend that money is better appreciated now by the administration. There's no sense budgeting X and spending X minus, whatever. It is better if you be reasonable and prudent, that when you budget a lesser figure for a particular program, you actually implement and execute it. So the games of saying you provide more for agriculture and so on, yes, but what did you spend the previous year? Yes, do you have the capacity to really use those monies and impact the farmers? The answer oftentimes is no. So capacity building to me in the ministry is crucial to achieve many of the other things that we spoke about.
Another question I'd like to ask, still in terms of, and this one goes across the board in terms of, how the ordinary person will be affected. Now, while the government, of course, exempts some of the items from VAT, we have not seen a price reduction. How will this be addressed? Let's say 2024.
Well, put it this way. There's a famous saying in the Caribbean when we look at these economies is that prices are sticky downwards, meaning that when they go up, they rarely come down. If they come down, they do not come down as appreciably as people think they should have come down. So the issue of price control becomes very, very critical. That if the government reduces taxes on particular items, the price, to me, that item should also be placed under price control legislation to ensure that the price control officers, by virtue of surveillance, see to it that those reductions are passed on. If you remove the taxes, it's not on the price control list, it still leaves the businessman to price it as he sees fit. Very few business persons, right, will genuinely pass on in full or at all some of the gains that are supposed to come through to the population through some of these fiscal measures, unless there is monitoring, there's surveillance, and there's enforcement. So my point is, reduction in certain items that are not on a price control list should be put on a price control list to give teeth to the authorities to ensure and to enforce that those reductions are passed on.
All right, I understand that. So, because it's one of the problems we, lots of individuals are having. The price.
Yes, and sometimes I always tell people too, and we argue, and rightly so, that there are things that you have no control over as a country who is heavily dependent on importing stuff. But oftentimes we have to make the right choice. Sometimes we shop out of habit in terms of the place and the product where we shop. We rarely do shop around, and sometimes shopping around helps. Changing your consumption mix also assists in you being able to have your budget stretch a little further than it otherwise would. So I just want to make that point for people. And also too, we believe that the locally produced products are cheaper than the imported ones. That is often not the case. You might get better value because it did not travel on sea or air and miles on a tractor trailer to get here, because it's produced locally. So you might get better nutritional value, freshness, and stuff like that. But the price oftentimes is not particularly
not even cheaper, because sometimes we do have that impression because it's grown here or what produced here, we were expecting it to be at a lower cost, but sometimes
it is not. You get better value, don't get me wrong.
Yes, I certainly do understand that. The quality is always better, or the value for it is always better. Now, another question I would like to ask, and this one comes to mind, and it's still in terms of how it will trickle down to the ordinary people, grassroots people. Now, there was a cap on price of gas, right, and diesel, but now we see gas price has gone beyond the initial cap. How does the budget address this escalating price?
Right, so the how do we cope with rising price of gas, especially for vehicles? And I have observed over the years, and we argue that, at least in the banking circles, that even though when there were no controls at all, prices went up, right? We have driven fewer miles on the island. People continue to drive. Nobody parks and take the bus because price gone up, right? We still joyride. Right? If the baby, does not fall asleep, we drive the baby around until the baby fall asleep. In other words, we do not change our behavior significantly when certain prices go up. Now, the pressure might be where bus fares might go up as a result of that, but private individuals, to me, in coping with rising gas prices, do not often, in aggregate, drive fewer miles, let's say now, as to compare when the price was, let's say, $2 or $3 less at the pump. And of course, the government does have a policy and a band within which they would intervene to keep the price at a particular level, and that I hope would come in, at the appropriate time.
At the appropriate time.
Yeah.
All right. Because, it's one of the things that grassroots people worry about. I mean, me being a driver myself, you being a driver yourself, of course, even though we may have the option of being able to manage it, the cost of it we always prefer it be less.
No. And the other thing too, that even when the price falls, sometimes we don't even drive more miles than we already.
Exactly, it's less, but then and it's the same thing we done. Exactly. We have done the same thing. Understandably so.
We could do to cope, yeah.
One other question before we take our first break this morning. This goes across the board also. TAMCC students, they're receiving that $810 subsidy from the government under the free tuition program. How is the government ensuring that the tuition is really free? Of course, it goes beyond the $810.
Okay, so let me say that is a highly commendable measure. We might not believe it, but the people who are to escape poverty on the island can best do so through education beyond secondary, what I call post-secondary, or let's say post-primary education, whether vocational, academic, or whatever we wish to call it, post-primary. And there are a lot of people on the island who will not be able to access TAMCC as a result of the tuition. I could tell you as a youth, in my own case, during the revolution, the tuition to what was called IFE at the time was reduced gradually over 3 terms until it became free. So it used to be $50 per term, then it came down to 25 the next term, $12.50 the next, and eventually got rid of it. And more people were able to come to thing, and we saw, to my mind, how that contributed to the cadre of professionals we have on the island, both in whatever field of endeavor that we have. So I'm saying that with this opportunity now, it is highly commendable, but it's not enough to my mind, because you have to put together the seed program, the free tuition, the school meals and those stuff in an overall package to see what the strategy is by way of giving people access to post-primary education to develop themselves and hopefully become successful either as business people or employees in the workplace. So if you have a case, for example, where a recipient of seed has kids who are in school, the benefit is not just the seed money that is being given, but there has to be a compact between the recipient and the kids to go to school. One, the meal is not an excuse for not being there, right? So you don't go to school hungry, and you have access to the lectures and that kind of stuff, and there will be support as well in terms of books and uniform. Again, we take these things for granted, but back in the day, books were hand-me-down, right?
So
over
true.
4 or 5 years,
so true.
the same
so
books.
True.
Nowadays, by the time the term halfway through, the books change. Those things to me have to stop, allow people to get their education at a reasonable and effective cost. And by the way, we say in TAMCC students, I'm not too sure that there's an age limit, maximum limit to how you can become a TAMCC student. So at 81 or 18, you should be able to enter TAMCC. the question, because there are people who dropped out because of economic circumstances. There are people who thought that by leaving secondary and going into the workforce to get some money and so on was the best strategy. Then they realized, no. So at 25, if you want to go back to learn building technology or automotive and so on, TAMCC is for you. And to my mind, the tuition waiver should be extended to those people as well, because what you want is to really and truly drive that human capital development. And you may say, well, why is that? Because the 25-year-old is working. And I'm saying, yes, but do you realize that for that 25-year-old to go to TAMCC class between 10 and 2, he's losing a day's work or she's losing a day's work.
You think that could work in the Grenadian economy?
No, there are adults who go to TAMCC.
Yes, I understand that.
And again, whether it could work or not, the issue is how do we inspire our people to believe that they can become more and they can do better. That life really and truly is not for, tomorrow, but is for next week, next month. How do we position ourselves to really participate in the growth and development of the Grenadian economy and society? And I'm suggesting and arguing that education, post-secondary, post-primary, is a crucial part of that. And while I start up on the TAMCC and stuff, allow me. Boca Secondary School now, Happy Hill Secondary School now, Grenville Secondary School now, and Waltham Secondary School now were once junior secondary schools in the Grenada education architecture. What was that junior secondary school? That's where when you left primary, if you didn't go to the traditional academic secondary, you went into these skills-centered, vocational-centered schools. That's what they were. So it's not a wonder that Boca still turns out some of the best technical folks on the island.
I'm an example of that.
And there you, I was talking about a while ago how much you love your technology and your engineering and that kind of stuff. So I'm saying, in terms of architecture, we have missed the mark to me 25 years ago. Hence the reason we are where we are today. And everybody is crawling. I heard Minister Boson. Right? Everybody vexed. But we had designed this, changed the design that was laid 25 years ago. We are reaping the benefits today. If there's a rethink, and rightly so, and a reposition of the education system to allow for access, whether through NULO, TAMCC, or wherever, let's do it. Grenada will be a far better place 10, 15, 20 years from now. That's my argument. Mm-hmm. So I'm not looking at the TAMCC tuition fee in isolation from all those other things that need to be put in place to to see the budget as a vehicle and a tool through which we'll get this development on the island. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's take that break. We're coming right back. Stay with us, folks. It's To The Point here on Classic Radio GBN TV. We'll be right back.
Family, it's always exciting when lottery players get together. Now the lottery games are joining in the fun. Check out the multiplier family of Instacash games. 5 times the cash at $2, 10 times the cash at $3, and 20 times the cash at $5. On your tickets, match any of our numbers with any of the winning numbers and win the prize below that number. There's more. Multiply your winnings up to 5 times, 10 times, or 20 times more. Winning is easy. Play Monday to Sunday. There are no draws to wait on. Win instantly. It's the multiplier family of Instacash games with over $675,000 to be won instantly. Don't just buy one, buy all, because family is everything. Must be 18 years and older to play. NLA, making family dreams come true.
We home for Christmas for 2 T20 internationals at the Grenada National Stadium on Thursday, December 14th and Saturday, December 16th. Locals get 50% off regular match tickets, plus an extra 20% off when you buy your tickets online. Visit windiescricket.com for more info.
On this Christmas episode of Caribbean Passport, there is holiday cheer from Barbados to the Bahamas. We take in the musical talents of the Love Movement, the Carters, and Ray Holman. And of course, our taste buds will be satisfied. All this and more on this holiday edition of Caribbean Passport, right here on this station.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, viewers, to The Point here on Classic Radio GBN TV. I have with me this morning Mr. Richard Duncan. And we're talking this morning, how is the budget going to impact the ordinary grassroots man and woman? Of course, the 2024 budget as was presented. And, we were having that healthy, off-air conversation, myself and Mr. Duncan, and reflecting on, my years as a youngster. I attended Boca Secondary School. And that's why I picked up my technical skill as being an electronic engineering stuff. And I picked that up. I've been for that and has got me through all the years. And as you mentioned, you might rightfully mention, with all of the subject matters that individuals go through, and all of the subject matter that I may have done back then, sometimes to a point they may not have played a significant part now. Even though I still use them.
Correct.
I still have to focus on my Ohm's law and all of these things in between. But having a technical way where a lot of youngsters now are trying to go through the subject matters of schools, do the maths, the English. Not say it's not important. We never don't play them, because they do play an important role in your life at some point or the other. In order to explain yourself or to talk, you do need these things. But then we see a lot of youngsters moving from primary school, get to the final, was it standard 6, 7, whatever it is, and then they sort of drop off, because most people are technically inclined. Their mind is at that level. They may not be interested in going to work, maybe like you said, be the bank or something like that. Right. But they could go to under a vehicle, go to do a construction site and perform wonders. Cool. You understand? So sometimes that level of it, and maybe that's where the budgeting could all comes in to help individuals at that level of their life.
Yeah. And you're fully correct, and that's why I'm arguing that those who may have dropped out or those who may have who want to retrain or reskill or retool and want to do so through TAMCC, my argument is that I hope that the tuition waiver applies to them as well.
Across the board.
Because you really want to galvanize and ramp up, those skill set. I mean, you're hearing stories where, the number of work permits that are being granted for business places and construction companies and so on to bring in folks who really and truly, had we done it right over the years, those jobs would have been handled by Grenadians. I'm not saying that I'm a narrow nationalist. I'm just saying you have to position yourself. And you have big contractors in Grenada, for example, just to name one, Creative Design and Construction, and that firm does work outside of Grenada. You should be able to move, 15, 20, 30 of your skilled workers to another country in the OECS and so on to work there for a period of time. And I think it was done in the past, but I'm saying that when the demand is such that you cannot supply, it means that you have to, import and substitute. But it's too chronic a problem on the island with respect to the dearth of skilled, highly trained, technicians and artisans, to help support the economy.
My next question leads to the direction where we are talking right now, especially in terms of youth and others. The youth forms a major part in our population, right? The youth forms a major part. With new initiative, should I say, what new initiative do we have for them, especially youth in Grenada? Would you say that 2024 budget may have considered as new initiative for youth?
Yes, it has. I think, and again, sometimes it's not so much so what's new, but what are we strengthening? So, my former boss used to say that youth is wasted on the young, meaning that they are so energetic and so talented that they really don't know what is coming by the time they reach 50, 60. If they know, they'll do much more with the energy, skills, and talent. So here it is, you have for example, the national sports policy, right? You heard the Prime Minister on the question of cricket and what we have achieved as, West Indians and so on. We have T20 tomorrow and Saturday on the island and so forth. You see, you're trying to create an atmosphere where people can believe in themselves. They put the structures in place and they can prosper and grow and perform well. So what we have done, and we as a country over the years, we have built a lot of lighted facilities.
Yes.
Right? When I grew up in Liberia as a youth, the playing field was very poor, shabby.
5 o'clock, you finish do whatever you do by 5 o'clock.
Exactly. But not only that, and hope that you don't bust your big toe because rock and tiff, right? But we still produce Janice Celestine as a top netballer, right? And others who, now the field is big, nicely grassed, and lit. There is absolutely, and cut once a month, nicely manicured, nothing happens there. Nothing happens there. And it is a problem, it repeats itself across the island. So I'm suggesting that the national sports policy and the structures that are going to be put in place will allow for structured competition among, whether it's inter-village, whether it is the clubs and so on. And back in the day, we played cricket in Monjaloo, Marian, Laborie, Monterey, Vincent's, all over the place. Annandale, Vendome. And there are bigger, better facilities now, and the level of involvement of the youth in sports, cricket, football and stuff, it is just not right. So I'm saying the national sports policy and the structures around that will help, to my mind, change that around for the better.
All right. Now, you spoke, we've been speaking, you spoke about youth and the use of flames. Now, when we expect to see that transition? I mean, I'm speaking in terms of youth, the money under the National Training Agency and so forth, as was announced by the Minister of Youth last year. When we expect that particular transition?
Well, I don't have a timeline on it. But I think that the pathway to the transition is nicely being laid out, because part of it comes now to the what we call through DP, making sure that we could regularize people. So that pathway is nicely crafted, different phases and so on that would be taking place. But I think the idea of having a program through which you can rapidly train and deploy young people is good, right? But they cannot remain as trainees forever, right? There must be a process of graduation, and I think that the ministry is well seized in making that happen. But most importantly, for the Imanis, until that day arrives, is the position in the budget which says that your minimum wage will be $1,200.
All right.
Right? So if you are working for 7, you'll move to 12. If you're working for 8, you'll move to 12. If you're working for 12, you remain there. If you're working for 13, you remain there. But the least any man should work for is $1,200. Right? And of course, through the regularization process, other things would happen over time. And importantly, with that is where you are saying that, hey, you cannot take advantage of the young. Now, make absolutely no pension and social security arrangement for them. It is just not right. So that is being fixed.
All right. Yeah, I say that because I did have, of course, the opposition yesterday who spoke on that themselves and was saying that there were issues where in Imani, there are individuals who have different qualifications.
Absolutely.
And in different qualifications will come different, wage range. Mm-hmm. You understand? So you're saying in the budget this time that it goes across the board as you mentioned. But you did mention depending on your
minimum is 12.
Minimum is 12.
Minimum is 12.
That you will always start at that.
And because rightly and truly, how do you in today's Grenada ask somebody to wake up, bathe, dress, take a bus, walk, run to a workplace for 8 hours? Come on, man. What is that?
It's
what really and truly is that?
I used to wonder about it myself,
No, really, and then no social. What really is? It is downright exploitation. It is not right. Yeah. So, and then with the regularization now based on merit and qualification, we put people in, and the hurtful part about it is that these people work side by side, doing the same job, task, routines, for people who are working for more than, it is not right.
And sometimes performs even better.
And sometimes performs even better. So hopefully, well, not hopefully, the intention is to have it done. And as I say, the regularization is taking place in different phases. And of course, based on merit, people will be fitted into, where it is justified and merited.
All right. Yeah. I want to go back to our initial conversation when we started. And this one goes with it, of course, according to the midterm report. Inflation on food and fuel is still unacceptably high. You understand? What new initiative has government put in place to ease the burden of course, on people?
Well, I think there were several items that the VAT reduction or removal was announced, so that's one. I think it was a whole list given by the Minister of Finance, and I just want to repeat it as I said earlier, that there is no point in removing taxes on items and at the same time not putting them on the price control list, right? I know these Western capitalist economies do not believe heavily in price control. They believe free market and that kind of stuff should be allowed to reign, but there are limitations to free enterprise capitalism. So if you have an intervention by the state to ameliorate or to lessen the burden on people, then it should not just be a fiscal measure to remove or to reduce a tax. There must also be the administrative mechanism to enforce and to see to it that the reductions are passed on. So my encouragement will be for the items to also be placed on the price control list, even if temporarily, and empower the price control officer to monitor the business places so that these prices can be passed through to people.
All right, I'll accept it for that. Another question before we take our break. Now we see the intention of the implemented Project 500. That's a question. That's something that's always interesting. I would love to hear your views on that. Can you give advice on how many persons have moved into that low income houses and currently exist? If it's possible.
The truth be told, I have no details on those statistics, but suffice it to say that I'm on record of crediting the Housing Authority and the government for the approach they have taken to allow people, right, after all the assessment and criteria and so on, is settled and the selection is made, to own these homes by virtue of taking a mortgage from a credit union or a bank. I described it as generosity and genius combined, because the price at which they are getting these items is extremely generous. People have to be lucky, in my opinion.
All right.
And then the genius obviously is realizing that Housing Authority is not a financier to be collecting monthly payment and hunting down people for arrears and so on. There are entities that do that better than the Housing Authority, and they are called banks and credit unions or creditors. They are very good at that. So you get a funding there, the government guarantees and backs you to make sure that you can qualify. The interest rate is extremely low and affordable because there's a government guarantee backing their arrangement, and therefore success is basically assured from all parties. And not only that too, I also want to make the point that when you are paying towards a property that will become yours, you cherish it, you value it, you protect it. Small people take great pride, to me, in their credit and in their name. Some of them will eat 2 meals, maybe one, to make sure they could pay their debts. So I'm very comfortable from my experience in banking that those who qualify for these houses and raise the money from a bank or a credit union will do their best to honor those debts and to pass on what we call wealth to the next generation. And by the way, if after you reach halfway, quarter way, whatever, your son or daughter becomes highly qualified and a trained professional, you sell the property and you might build somewhere else for, mommy or daddy or the family elsewhere. So then that's how you transfer the wealth.
All right, understandably so. Another question I would like to ask, I said we're going to take that break, but make sure I should just get those questions in before we take the break. Now, can you explain to me how the contracted growth or the deceleration of the growth rate in 2024 is likely to affect the average person?
Well, I don't expect, first of all, the lower growth rate, I don't think would have any great impact on the ordinary man, so to speak, because what you do when you measure growth, so an economy will grow by 5% one year and grow by 3% the next year, but the 5% growth has resulted in a certain level of economic activity. Yes. So you're billing, 3% on top of that, right? You're not billing 6 or, So I'm saying that let us not worry too much that the level of economic activity and so on at 3% is significant that would result in any great unemployment situation and so forth. What you have to worry about is when there's what we call contraction in the economy.
Yes.
Right? That's when there is quote unquote negative growth. That's when you see unemployment begin to rise, people are unable to meet their bills, they fall into arrears, with payments and stuff like that. So the economy is definitely not on such a trajectory, but of course lower growth than last year, given the height at which you were in 2023. That said, I think that tourism will continue to do well. Construction might, well, I'm not too sure if I'm speaking of that in terms of official numbers, but with some of your big projects coming to an end, unless others don't kick in on time with the same force, you could see some, measure of contraction, but I think that the public sector works will be ramping up. For example, the G-Cruise project on Nanawasa, that obviously is being ramped up. So we will see enough economic activity to ensure that the performance of the revenues, the stability of employment, the SGU, student intake, that remains high. I think they are beyond pre-COVID levels now, or very close to that, and all those are good signs that 2024 is another strong year. And by the way, something that I don't think again, I might be talking out of turn, whether or not we have factored in the independence celebrations into our mix, because there'll be a lot of consumption taking place, I would suggest, between January and maybe March, and then you have Carnival kicking in. So if the carnage appears to be a situation where the sea has come up, but now that the sea has come up, the country has gone down a bit because of the number of people on the island.
Yes.
In 2024.
Have a bit of a lean.
That's the point. So you'll have a strong consumption and boom, and that too tends to spill off,
Okay, all right.
Economic activity.
Let's take a break. When we come back, I still have one question for you when we come back, and when we get, and then I see my phones are going, which means, of course, our listeners, viewers, prompt to chiming in, of course, question or two they may would like to ask. Sure. When we come back. Stay with us, folks. It's To The Point here on Classic Radio GBN TV. We'll be right back after the break.
This month on Caribbean Medical.
The pediatrician's main role is to care for the health of children, and that caring starts from birth all the way up to the young adult stage.
When it comes to child development, it's very important to be aware of how your child is developing. Since before birth, children, especially the neurological system, develops at a very rapid pace.
Be viewing Caribbean Medical right here on this station.
I want to control your anger. There's a way to feel better. That's one thing to remember. No matter where you are, you can be a star. Stop and take a deep breath and relax yourself. Take another deep breath and relax it, and relax it. Eliminate violence.
Welcome back, listeners. Welcome back, viewers, to The Point for today, Wednesday, the 13th day of December 2023. Good morning to you once again. With me this morning, my guest, Mr. Richard Duncan. So, Duncan, we promised to take some calls. I did have a question, but let's entertain 2 calls, and then we can probably come back to the question. Let's take our first caller. Caller, good morning. You're welcome.
Yeah, good morning, GT, and morning, Mr. Duncan. There's quite a few questions I would like to ask, but I know I don't have the liberty. In terms of, and I'm glad that he did mention the issue of independence factoring for the next year. But he also mentioned about our seeing lack of ability or refusal to change our behavior, particularly when you have the lowering of gas price or even the height. But I want him to address the issue that there's some certain systemic problem we may face, like, for instance, supply chain issue, as with the Panama Canal, the challenges in the Panama Canal, not being able to pass through goods as regularly as they should. And then some of the other issues that are facing us internationally. And then the final one is to do with the fact that the Caribbean heads of government have set up a commission, a task force under the leadership of David Commission to chart the way for full freedom of movement by the 31st of March this year. I wonder if we have factored that in too. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much for your contribution as well. Any response for the caller?
Yeah, please. Well, let me just speak a little bit on the freedom of movement. Now, people may have heard a lot of talk about CARICOM, single market and economy, and not to be quite sure what it means and what the implications are. And it comes back to some of the issues that we spoke to earlier. We are going to be outcompeted on our own island once this freedom of movement occurs in terms of mobility of labor. Right, and we have to rapidly have our people trained and certified. We hear about the CVQ, we hear about the the National Training Agency, and so forth. These mechanisms are key and crucial to making sure that competitively we can participate here and compete when folks come in to compete for jobs that we have on the island, and we have to be able to export our skills to other CARICOM countries. So I think the whole thrust with skills training, with certification, is extremely important. A bit late, but if you don't start now, when will you start? So my admonition to the authorities is to make sure that we invest heavily and encourage people. Because sometimes, you plant the food, you nurture the crops, you reap the fruits, you prepare the meal, you put it on the table, you put the utensils or the implements for the food to be eaten, and it seems as though the authorities have to put the spoon in the mouth of the people who are supposed to digest the food. Governments can do so much and no more, but we have to incentivize the population to take part in the process, and part of it is creating the awareness, creating the confidence, creating the wanting to be more, wanting to improve your circumstances, want to be better than where you met your parents and so forth. That will help people to come in and participate. I think former Minister Anthony Boson made a point earlier that you can have great economic growth, but if the population is not sufficiently skilled or qualified to participate in the process, then obviously the growth would not be as much as, or not as enriching as it could otherwise be. So that part of it, I think, is extremely, extremely important, where we need to encourage people to reskill, retool, educate themselves, and ministries and departments now need to be more accessible. In other words, not everyone knows how to negotiate the bureaucracy, Sometimes, even me, having worked in the system and worked in banking, if I didn't understand how the system worked, I could be frustrated. So I just imagine for other people who don't understand the system, we have not taught it in school, we have not gone out there and do enough outreach. How do you get to apply for a scholarship? You don't have to go through the politician. How do you get to apply for some form of assistance, right? Do we have to? The question is no. If you want a passport, who are the justice of the peace you go to get it signed, right? These things should be easily accessible and available, and people have to be assisted in knowing how to navigate the bureaucracy and to get access to those things which the state through taxation is making available to them. More has to be done in that regard.
Right. We do have another caller. Caller, good morning. You're welcome.
Hi, good morning to you, JT, and your followers, and Mr. Duncan. I'm happy to hear the point that you raised this morning. First of all, the matter, you hear the opposition talking about all this money unspent and all this thing that were not done. And as I was saying to someone only this morning, the NNP, they decimated the public service. They emasculated the ministries. So while the new administration may provide for a full-staffed ministry, there were not people there to do the work. They couldn't hire anyone. The Ministry of Agriculture, for instance, there were about 4 or 5 heads of department that were absent. No chief technical officer, no head agronomist, no head veterinarian officer. All these things were vacant. So while you may budget for it with the hope of filling them, you can't. The capacity is not there to do those things. So when one finger is being pointed at the new administration for not spending the money, all other fingers are pointing at those who brought us here. That now there is budget, but we have no people. The same thing in health, They provided for a lot of vacancies that were there. Can they be filled? No. Because the incentives that were given, were supposed to be given, were not given. We lost a lot. There was a brain drain. And now, the same one to turn around and say, all this money unspent? You are the cause of it being unspent. Because you decimated the public service. You've killed the capacity to deliver what wants to be done. Another quick thing about the housing. I had to speak to somebody at length on Sunday. Say they got offer for a house and they turned it down. How does the government expect poor people to be able to raise money, go to the bank? I said, it has to be paid for by somebody. But don't forget, if you are given a house that's worth $100,000 for $50,000, when you go to a financial institution, you already have $50,000 equity in the house, and then it's easier for you to negotiate because you already have equity given to you by government as a result of the reduction of the cost. And I had to also say to that person, as a young person with children, it's an investment. It is an opportunity for you to have some sort of capital, some sort of wealth creation to pass on to your children. Why will you walk away from an opportunity like this? But it's a mindset that has been created that we have to change. Folks, see this as an opportunity to have assets, to grow wealth, to have something for your children, and say, no, it's supposed to be free, and why are they charging for it? Oh, come on. Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. Thank you so much. You want to respond to anything the caller said?
Thank you, GT. So just thanks, caller. You see, the whole idea is, well, apart from the capacity issue, right? And one may say maybe that's why the notion of there being a pregnant treasury is being put forward. In other words, you had, to my mind, you now have a taxation system after many years of tinkering and changing and so on, to me, that is mature, that is generating naturally without any additional rates and so on and so forth through the performance of the economy and the management of the fiscal affairs that is working well on the taxation side, on the revenue side. Yes, you are going to strengthen the tax administration to make sure that everyone pay his or her fair share. So we get in there as a country. So here you are with those resources and an inability or unwillingness to deploy it for the benefit of the society. And we could beat up on the pension, we could beat up on the dock salary, we could beat up on people who beat in drum and pan and marching in the sun for 4%. I was already agreed and stuff like that. We could go there. That is, the politics and referendum about the politics and so on. But from a pure fiscal and economic management standpoint, it just does not make sense that an economy that can generate certain resources is at the same time unable, it seems, to properly deploy it for the furtherance of the well-being and welfare and growth of that said economy. So capacity building, as the caller said, is critical because, again, you can spend the money, to do what? Prudence is critical. So you need to know what projects you're implementing, make sure that the implementation rate is proper, what I call the execution velocity, meaning you're doing the right things in the right way at a particular speed, that these things are done. We need trained people in the service to get that done. If you go private sector, you need to have proper relationships that you could govern to achieve those results. So I think, by and large, as a country, our fiscal tax design, tax system, to me, is at a mature stage and is working quite well. I think on the expenditure side and the program side, especially to assist those who are justifiably in need of state support to take them to the next level, that we continue to work and improve on those areas.
Let's entertain another caller. Caller, you're welcome. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Telesford. Greetings and greetings to Mr. Duncan. A couple of months ago, probably a year ago, the leader of the country identified to the population that, in effect, Grenada lives within a quote-unquote caste system, C-A-S-T. For those who don't know, that system is designed with stratas, societal stratas. The poor, vulnerable, marginalized, etc., on the bottom sector, and to the top, the aristocracy, the powerful ones. Mr. Duncan, in recent times, we heard quarrels about a certain amount of money were put on to the quote-unquote vulnerable. When I speak of the vulnerable, it will do it a little faster, the introduction. I refer to the United Nations through their conventions, the definition given there. And there are three major groups of people. The induced poverty and otherwise and so on. I want to leave that out for now, the vulnerable. $150, equivalent to 50% of what the people in the seed program were given, was increased, were put on because of the increased prices, etc., coming through from the COVID end of 21 into 22, 23. It was removed. It was promised in the parliament that we put back. It was never put back. We heard of the argument, of course, that it was temporary, hallelujah. But the fact is, it served a purpose. It served a purpose because we all know that the prices that went up in 21 have never come down. They're still, as a matter of fact, it was confirmed recently that these items and so on are being put onto the price control list for greater vigilance. But take a look at it. In recent times, it was reported that as of January, it will be increased by 66% for the quote-unquote vulnerable. And that's great. Hallelujah. There's some. But I want to compare it with the figure proposed for the members of parliament, 300+%. Take a look at it. This is what I want to focus on. 300%, let me see, at 200, maybe about 315%. These people are working, yes, and maybe it's justified. But the people who receive 66% increase, having to buy the same thing. True, it's not salarial, it's not because they're working to collect a salary, but it is quote-unquote, using your own words, which you spoke of a while ago, justifiably a case of assistance of the state. Justifiably. At a level of entitlement, because most of these people have worked for this country prior in a manner even voluntarily, and so it's due to them. My question is, what brings this disparity? Is it because of the caste system, where the aristocratics get the higher level and the others vulnerable, and if you care to include poor now, get the quote-unquote shitty end of the stick? Thank you very much and have a nice day, will you, sir?
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And so, response, Mr. Duncan? We kind of been strapped for time, but
no. I think good point made by Citizen Rollo and good observation. However, I would argue that the protection of Grenada's democracy rests, to me, heavily on fighting two things. One, corruption among politicians and senior government officials and employees. And two, attracting to public life people who are able or supposedly able to make a proper and effective contribution to public life. So these things come at a price. The cost of corruption is well established globally, and if you have public officials, elected and otherwise, who are not adequately compensated, the propensity to fall victim of corruption, which by the way costs these countries in the millions, and Grenada is not an exception, will continue to wreak havoc on us, and the same persons who are justifiably entitled or in need of state support will also suffer. So that will be my response, Citizen Rollo. And in our own case, after 50 years of independence, it is really and truly sad that we have missed the boat for so long in ensuring that elected officials are adequately compensated. And if you ask me, the arrangements have fallen short in the sense that it does not say when and how a next review will be done. Is it every 3 years? Is it every 5 years? Would you use a consulting firm to do a survey and stuff like that? What factors would you measure in to justify the increases for those folks? You cannot wait until the public workers or somebody else come to a union negotiation and have a settlement and say give parliamentarians the same thing, because the very same politicians who have the final say in whether or not a settlement is accepted by the unions and the workers will be benefiting. So they are directly conflicted, and I'm not too sure the basis on which public workers are compensated should be the same basis for elected officials who are their bosses in the first place. So it's a debate that we need to settle, I think, once and for all in a modern democracy. How are your elected officials or members of your parliament, elected and otherwise, compensated for the service to state and country?
All right. I have one final question before we take a wrap this morning, Mr. Duncan. Now, how can you anticipate the minimum wage? How would it affect the business community?
Well, the first effect obviously would be that unless they find other efficiencies within the business operations and so on, a slight increase in the cost of the product or service or good as the case may be. Normally, we see businesses are able to cushion those increases. The word out of the committee is that the private sector is extremely comfortable with those recommendations. Some people are scoffing at them to say that, boy, none of our workers are going to be impacted because they all are above the minimum already. So, it's a good thing. So the minimum wage really actually signals to people that which you should not pay. You should not pay less than that. But if somebody's skills, competence, and experience justifies a higher pay, obviously they will get a higher pay, and they are getting a higher pay. So no negative fallout of any proportion is expected from the implementation of the minimum wage for the reasons that I've just alluded to. And I think what is important too is not the hodgepodge way in which we go about it, meaning that the law requires for, I think, every X number of years to review. Review does not mean change, but at least it should go through the process on time, so that when you come with a recommendation, it is not a drastic increase in the minimum wage, because it has been done incrementally during the intervening years as required by the legislation. And more importantly, if you do it frequently, then all stakeholders become familiar with the process and they are able to edify themselves and more meaningfully participate in the discussion and the research and the debate and that kind of stuff, and they enrich the process and by extension the outcome.
Thank you so much. Of course, that's where we get to wrap our conversation this morning, Mr. Duncan, and certainly thank you for being here this morning. And our conversation this morning focused mostly on how the budget is going to impact the ordinary grassroots man and woman. And I saw in terms of our conversation this morning, I hope most of the individuals who in that particular strategy, I hope they may have understand what we spoke about and maybe the impact it would be for 2024. Any closing comments from you, sir?
Yes, GT, I want to thank you for the opportunity once again to attempt to enlighten and edify the population on matters of fiscal and economic and financial nature, and to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a prosperous 2024, encouraging people to look for the opportunities, to believe that you can do more, believe that you can break the cycle of dependence, and find ways and means with assistance of others in doing precisely that. Be more, uplift yourself, leave this place better than you met it. Lay a good foundation for your future, for your children rather, and their future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. And if we don't get to converse again before the end of 2023, best wishes for the season goes out to you, sir. All the best. Thank you once again. Hey, folks, that's how we take a wrap for today's edition of To The Point. Thanks to all who contributed some way or the other, and best wishes for the rest of the day. That's where I say goodbye.